Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm your host, Adam Bird, and I have got an awesome interview lined up for you guys today. You guys are going to absolutely love this one. I'm super stoked to have this man on the show. He is a community hero, Navy SEAL turned Army doctor, to opening up his own medical practice. I've had the privilege to get to know him the last several months, and I love talking to this man every time I talk to him. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him on right now, my friend, Dr. Robert Adams. Bob, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great, thank you.
Listen, you have got quite the career, and you've also turned author. You've written 2 books. Your first book, 6 Days of Impossible, a Navy SEAL Hell Week, a Doctor's Look Back. We'll get into that here in just a moment. And then you have a new book out that we're going to talk about today as well, called Swords and Saints, A Doctor's Journey. But before we get into the books, why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and Navy SEAL turned doctor?
I'm a Navel Academy graduate, 5th generation career military. Dad was Naval Academy. Granddad was superintendent of the Naval Academy, a 3-star. And then go back 2 more generations, it goes all the way to the Civil War.
Wow.
And I went to the Academy to be a Navy SEAL. That's what I wanted to do. And I said, well, if I'm going to be a SEAL, I might as well be an officer. I'm going to be an officer. I might as well go to the Academy. But I had to spend a year and a half on a destroyer before I was able to get into the training program. Spent a total of 18 years in the Navy. Tried to get a Navy scholarship, but they offered me a 3-year one, and the Army offered me a 4. So I switched uniforms since I was going to be 36 years old, starting medical school with 2 children, and money made that decision for me. Spent 18 years in the Army, most of it at Fort Bragg, brief stint at Iraq, which we're going to talk about here a little bit, and then set up private practice after retirement, and I'm pleased to say just retired 2 months ago from practice, and I'm now a professional author trying to make a living.
Well, and you're doing fantastic with that. Listen, I got to ask, why Navy SEAL to doctor? Why the doctor side? What was it? Just like it was, you felt like it was a time for a change, and you're like, you know what, I want to be a doctor, and then, or was that something that was always kind of in the back of your mind that was something that you wanted to pursue?
No, it had never, ever entered my mind until later in life. But for people that have watched what SEALs and Delta Force soldiers and sailors do, they realize it is a young man's job. And you age out of the ability to climb up mountainsides with 60-pound rocks on your back. And later, I was in my 30s, and I had transferred into the SEAL reserves during the post-Vietnam drawdown, tried my luck in the business world, got an MBA, and didn't like it immediately. There's no morals, there's no ethics in the process of making money. And so I came home one day and said, I hate this. What? She goes, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go back on active duty. But at that time, SEALs were drawing down, military was drawing down. They wouldn't take me back. So I said, all right, let's find out what else in the world has ever been exciting to me, because I want the excitement that being a SEAL platoon commander brought me. And I looked back on my life, and I remembered my biology class from college that I loved. It was my only 4.0. And I said, doctors study biology. So I started thinking about it, looked into it, came home one day, told my wife, said, I think I want to go to med school. But you got to give me permission, because that means we'll go to 7 years of abject poverty again, borrow money to live, and we have 2 kids. And her answer thrills me to this day. She goes, look, we were poor and happy when we got married. We can be poor and happy again.
Wow.
Go do what makes you happy. And that's what did it.
Wow. How long you guys been married?
38 years.
That's it. Oh, that's awesome.
Wonderful.
That is awesome. Bob, let's talk about the first book, 6 Days of Impossible, Navy Hell Week. What prompted that?
So I've read over the last 10 years since SEALs have been writing books, every single book that I could get my hands on, and every one of them mentions Hell Week as the, defining moment in their lives. And I know that nobody knows what that is. And I go, somebody's got to write this book and tell people what Hell Week is. So, one day at a time, I just started interviewing my classmates, looking for, a common theme as a physician now, looking back to see if I could find, what our common theme was. In our class, 11 out of 70 of us made it. 60 people that were in equally good shape and should have made it didn't. They walked away, and I wanted to find out why. So I wrote the book for that simple reason, because I discovered the common theme that we all had, and nobody had done it. So I said, I'm going to write it. And so this book, 6 Days of Impossible, walks you through 6 days of no sleep, soaking wet, freezing cold, shivering uncontrollably for days at a time. And that's why I called it impossible. You tell people you did that, they go, nah, you didn't really. Yeah, we really did. And the only way we could have made it was that we had learned something from life before going. And I've asked Mike Thornton, a Medal of Honor winner, who was one of our instructors, hey, Mike, am I right in this one? If life beats you up before you go to SEAL training, are you better able to make it? And he goes, absolutely, Bob. He's the only Medal of Honor winner to win the Medal of Honor or saving the life of his officer, another Medal of Honor winner. And his story is out there in an amazing, amazing book. But, he was working in his grandfather's business at 11 years old in attics, installing air conditioning systems in 100-degree weather. And I go, okay, that would toughen you up.
Where can people purchase this copy or this book, Bob?
6 Days of Impossible, Navy SEAL Hell Week is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the online book publishers. Okay. As is our new book, which we published with Heroes Media Group. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And that's on all the online book sellers. And it's also on the book's website. The first one is on SEALHellWeek.com. Okay. The second one is SwordsandSaints.com.
Okay. And we're going to get into Swords and Saints in a minute. So, folks, if you're listening right now, NavySealHellWeek.com. Is that what you said, Bob? Yes?
No, just SealHellWeek.com.
Oh, so I'm sorry. You're right. SealHellWeek.com. Here, I guess if I read this right in front of me. So if you're listening to the show, open up another browser right now. Go to www.SealHellWeek.com. You can get a copy of that right there. Order your copy today. Now I want to transfer over and transition into this new book that just recently came out, Swords and Saints: A Doctor's Journey. I love the title of it right off the bat. What prompted this story, and give a teaser a little bit of what people can expect with this book.
So this book was written with intent. I wanted my individual learning stories that I've told students and residents and even patients to be written down so they don't die with me. And it is a deliberate effort to help anybody that thinks they might want to be a doctor, or to help any patients that's ever wondered if their doctor knows what he's doing, right, to kind of walk people through the incredible long learning process that any doctor, PA, or nurse practitioner has to go through to get good at their profession.
I'm trying to think of the words to describe this book. When I sit down and read it, I'm a very visual person, and I read this as I'm reading the book. It's you're taking people through. It's an education piece, but it's so much more than that. I mean, it's a man's journey. I can't help but to chuckle every time I say a Navy SEAL turned Army doctor, because it's just not something you really ever really hear. And you've had such a tremendous career in the special operations community, and thank you for that. First off, when I read this book, it's almost like you're right there with you. You're taking people from the battlefield, in the field hospitals, in doing surgeries on people, and I'll let you kind of go into detail with that a little bit more here in just a second, to delivering babies, to then starting your own practice. But it's such a visual educational piece, and you can't help but to sit here as like, man, this guy's Superman. And it's like, is this guy for real? Like, does this stuff really happen? And it has, and that's the beauty of it. And there's so much to it. I want you to. We were talking offline a little bit, and I want you to tell one of the stories that we were talking about a little bit, and then I guess this kind of goes into the decision hour. I said I was going to be the last question, but I'm going to bring it up now. you made it. There was a decision, and we were talking about an example that you had. You know which one I'm talking about?
Sure.
Yeah. You want to? Can you talk about that right now?
Well, and you started by saying, what are the hard decisions that you had to make in your life?
Yeah.
And hard and difficult have different definitions in the special operations world. Yeah. But saving a life and trying to save a life or deliver a baby, those are always hard situations that panic is common. The story that I started to tell you was at 2:00 in the morning, I received a phone call in my brand new clinic that we'd just established in the early part of the war in Iraq with the 82nd Airborne Division. And I happened to be the doctor on call. There were 3 doctors in my group with the 82nd Airborne, and said, stand by to receive a casualty. We're sending you by ambulance. The helicopters aren't flying because very rarely it rains in Iraq, and that night it was raining. Yeah. And so they said, we're going to send you an ambulance 2 hours out, and you got to get him stable and ship him to the surgeons 2 hours from me, because the ambulances have limits on how far they can go on an individual trip. I go, okay, fine. So I scrambled my medics, and I said, look, go get me a couple medics. Everybody's asleep. And of course, word got out real quick, and all 3 doctors showed up, and all my medics showed up, and the clinic was completely staffed when this ambulance arrived. And I warned them ahead of time. I said, guys, this is a bad guy. This is the guy that's coming to us, tried to drive an explosive-laden truck into our headquarters, and which was 2 hours away. And the bullets we're going to be treating are U.S. bullets that they shot him with. The guy comes in the door with his right arm amputated, tourniquet in place. It's hanging there by a thread. There's 3 bullet wound entrances and only 1 exit, but he's talking to us. And, it's surprising. They'd given him morphine, and he was alert and awake, but he had an IV in his clavicle vein, and he had one in his femoral vein, neither of which were working. Over the 2 hours with him writhing in pain, they had come out or stopped working. So I had a pediatrician with me, and I said, we need an IV in this guy to give him medicines, give him fluid, and all his veins are collapsed because he's bled out so much. You put a vein in a baby's head, why don't you put one in this guy? He tried, he couldn't do it. And I said, all right, this is a challenge. If I don't get fluid access to this guy, he's not going to make it the 2 hours we got to go. And I said to my medic, run back there and get my advanced trauma life support book and lay it open on his knees, because I'm going to do what's called a venous cut down on his ankle. I'm going to find the vein. I'm going to thread an IV in it, and I'm going to give him IV access. I'd done it on animals, but I'd never done it on a human being. And on that evening, in the early morning, I had the book open in front of me. I followed the rules, made the cut, found the vein, told the medic, there it is. Slid an IV in it, tied it off, and we gave him fluids and we gave him IVs, and the guy lived. He made it to the surgical site 2 hours out, much to my surprise. And there's another decision that had to happen that night too, which I love to applaud. I tell the story of the pediatrician who couldn't get the IV and helped me with this trauma case, who is now an active duty colonel as a pediatrician in the Army. That evening, we loaded him into the ambulance, and we're ready to launch with the medic, because doctors don't go on ambulance transfers because it's very dangerous.
Right.
They have armed men leading and following the ambulance in vehicles, but we don't have enough doctors to let him go. So he reaches out the door and he grabs me. He goes, I got to go. And I went, Craig Dobson was his name, Colonel Craig Dobson now. I can't let you go. You know the rules. It's against regulations. He goes, Bob, this medic is so scared. He can't figure out how to draw 5 milligrams out of a 10 milligram vial. This guy's going to die en route, and it needs to be on my conscience and not his. Still chokes me up to this day that he did that. And I was the colonel in charge, and I had to say, Captain, if we do this, we're going to break rules. We could both get, in trouble for it. But it's the right thing to do. I'm going to let you go. Don't die en route, okay? And he then launched, with my permission, I took it on myself to make this 2 hour run. And I didn't find out until I wrote the book and I sent him the chapter about this, that what he actually did then was go to the battalion commander that was providing the armed escort for his ambulance. And he goes, "Sir, it's 4:00 in the morning. If we take the 2-hour route, he's probably going to die." And it was actually closer to 3-hour route. "But if we take your armed men and we blow right through bad guy country, armed and loaded in the rain at 4:00 in the morning, we can get them there in 45 minutes. And sir, that's what I'd like you to authorize us to do." And the lieutenant colonel in charge of the 82nd Airborne Division said, "Doc, go do it." And he launched the armed men protecting that ambulance through bad guy country, and nobody ever saw him come or go. And that's why that soldier lived.
Holy crap.
And by the way, you made this comment, what about all these men that are saving the life of an enemy who just tried to kill us all?
You said that you had an entire staff come in that night, and then you're explaining to them that it's an enemy combative.
They all wanted to be there to help, because that's the Hippocratic Oath. That's what America is famous for in every war that America has ever fought. When an enemy combatant comes to you as a prisoner or as an injured on the battlefield, the medics are going to try to save their lives. And that's not true of every country we fight.
No,
but it's
not.
Definitely true of America.
Yeah. Wow. That. Oh, yeah, it just gets you pumped up right now listening to that.
I do make the point that I don't think we cared as much about his pain as we would if it was one of our own, but we definitely cared enough to want to save his life.
Right. Absolutely. You mentioned where people can get Swords and Saints. Well, go ahead and say that. It was a website. Where is it offered right now?
www.swordsandsaints.com.
Okay.
And of course, all of the online booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, etc.
This is a book.
And it's also out on Kindle.
This is a book you have to have. Hands down, folks. Like, listen, those of you that have been listening to me for years, I'm first off, thank you for listening. You've been a very loyal following group and whatnot worldwide. This is a book that you have to have, and it's not often that I say that. This is one that will give you a new perspective on life. That's for sure. Listening to a man that's been in the military, served in the military, 35 plus years, 36 years, I believe. In the special operations community, not just in one service, but in two. And that's not. I mean, when I say that this man is unique, they broke the mold, and there was Bob. I mean, that's he's a very, very special person. I'm honored that I get to sit here and talk with him, and that I've gotten to know him the last several months. In him writing this book and putting this together. Swordsandsaints.com. Bob, this is, again, I can't help but to think like you literally, the words that you use in this book really paint the picture of your life, in the chapters that you go through. And it's honestly, my hat's off to you, because I really do feel like you put the reader right there, standing next to you and watching you go through each chapter of this book and explaining it in such detail. God, I had a question there, and now I lost it because I'm just thinking about it.
I'll jump in and tell you that was my intent, because I really wanted this book to be a picture book for people that might want to be a doctor.
Okay.
And it walks you through student to resident to young doctor, and it teaches the learning process that doctors have to go through. It's so important that as a consumer, we understand that doctors don't really get very good at what they do until they've had years and years and years of training. And with the system changing right now to put PAs and nurse practitioners and even medical students, during this COVID crisis, when this tape is being done, we're graduating medical students early from medical school to go to work. And I got to be honest with you, I don't want a medical student working on me. Thank you very much. They know just enough to be dangerous. So it's a scary situation out there, and it's okay. And this book tells you it's okay to ask your doctor, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?"
Right. I love the fact that you bring that up. You make it okay, and you make it so where people that are reading this you should ask questions. I think if you're not asking, I've probably annoyed my doctor so many times because I tend to ask, like, "Are you sure about that? I don't like taking that. Like, listen, you gonna trust me?" "No, I don't trust anybody. I don't, I have a hard time trusting my family. What makes you think I'm gonna trust you?" You know what I mean? It's like I ask a lot of questions, but you make it okay. You make it okay, and you encourage people to ask their doctors questions. And I don't think that that's something that I think they just assume, like, "Oh, he's the expert or she's the expert. I need to listen to what they're saying." And unless you ask, you really don't know.
A question you didn't ask me yet, and that is, why is the word saints on the cover?
Wow.
Because a number of people who've read my book and even editors with great insight said, "Are you sure you want to use that word, doctor?" And throughout the book, I have patients whose life I've saved, whose babies I've delivered, who, God worked through me to help me through the most difficult times of my life. And the patients called me a saint. And that happens to all doctors. If you save a life, you're a saint in their minds. But I make the point equally well that there's no saint sitting in front of you right now. We're human. We make mistakes. One of my brilliant editors went through this book and said, "I'm about 3/4 of the way through this book, and I'm waiting for you to do something bad because you're only telling the good stories."
Right.
Oh, you're right. I need to tell the bad stories. And so, I comment on the mistakes that were made and the challenges that were not met and the lives that I wished I had saved but didn't. So, it's a very human experience.
Yeah.
And there is no doctor that's a saint, and there never will be.
You're very transparent. I love the fact that you brought that up. We're coming up on time here, Bob. Listen, folks, if you're listening to the show, it means you're already online. Open up another browser. Get your copy today. You want this book. You need this book right now. Swordsandsaints.com. It will not. Once you get started, you're not going to be able to put it down. That I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Bob, any parting words that you want our listeners to know?
No, I think you've covered most of what we did about the book. And I will tell you that, I'm proud of both of these. They're life experiences, and there's a connection. If you buy the first book, check out the second book, because they're both from a doctor's perspective about life challenges.
I alibi real quick. Question for those that are interested in getting into the medical field or the medical practice, what advice can you give them?
Oh, well, I think it's important to note that the medical world is changing. The last chapter in my book makes that point as poignantly as I can. It factored greatly into my decision to retire at this young age, because it's difficult to navigate the changing system. And I make the point that the system's going to change. It's going to get better. Everybody knows it's broken. And the COVID crisis is bringing that into everybody's living room right now. So if you want to go into medicine, do it. The challenges have never been greater, but the capabilities are awesome and getting awesomer. You're going to have more fun as a physician now than anybody has ever had in the past, because we have the ability to cure and treat disease that is greater than any time in history. Go do it.
Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Robert Adams. Bob, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and our listeners today.
Thank you, sir.
Folks, again, if you're listening to the show, you got to check it out, swordsandsaints.com. Get your copy today. Quick shout out to Heroes Media Group. If you have or go check out Heroes Media Group at heroesmediagroup.com. Check out all the other shows. And you can also, you'll be able to find both books of Bob's up there here shortly on the website. If you got questions, reach out to us. Again, go to www.heroesmediagroup.com. That's all the time I have for today. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.